Welcome today to Mind in America. Today's Mining Minute is on the Grants Mineral Belt. New Mexico is historically the largest uranium producer in the United States. Between the 50s and the 80s, produced over 40% of domestic uranium in the US, and 99.8% of that came from the Grants Mineral Belt. The belt encompasses 3 counties as well as tribal land. And the closest community is Grants, New Mexico, which is on historic Route 66 and home to the Uranium Museum, if you ever care to visit. It remains, that is, Grants Mineral Belt remains the largest untapped historic resource in the United States. Today's guest is Daria Sayan of Grants Energy, and we welcome him. As a little side note, between the recording of this and the airing of this, Daria did become a father, and we wish he and his wife and their new baby boy all the best and great health and happiness. Daria, I love your hat.
Thank you very much. Very on theme today.
Yes, yes, it was a gift.
Yeah. So gift from my wife. So very supportive of the work we're doing.
And it was when you first started with the
Oh,
company.
what? Yeah. When I first started, so I just joined the uranium industry about 7 months ago. Before that, I was in aerospace and defense. So when I first came over, I was mentioning to her, did you know that the majority of uranium in the world is produced by Kazakhstan, and that a lot of the uranium that the U.S. ultimately uses in their reactors is produced abroad? And so we definitely needed a hat like this to kind of hit the message home that we need a domestic supply.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thanks for joining us today. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then Greg jump right in.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for having me, Janet and Greg. My name's Daria Sayan. I'm the Director of Regulatory Affairs for Grants Energy. So we're a company out of New Mexico, and we're focused on launching the Grants Precision ISR project. And that's going to be one of potentially the largest domestic uranium production projects in the U.S.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Daria, we met briefly once before, but maybe just a lot of people might not be as familiar with either yourself or with Grants Energy. So maybe just a little bit of background, your backstory, where you went to school, maybe a little bit more on your time in defense, and then a little bit more on Grants specifically.
Yeah, I'd love to. So to start, I grew up in the Northeast, a little north of Boston. I went to UMass Amherst for my undergrad in business, and in legal studies was my second major. And then after graduating, I joined aerospace and defense, spent 11 years with Raytheon. I moved out to Tucson, Arizona for a job where I got my MBA from University of Arizona, but also met my wife, which was the best part of the whole experience. After that, we moved to Dallas, again with Raytheon. And then I was offered this amazing position in June of last year. So ever since I've been in San Diego, working on the Grants Precision ISR project. A little bit about the company. So we're a newly created division within Rio Grande Resources. Rio Grande Resources basically purchased the Mount Taylor mine facility. It was a conventional mine facility that was operated from about 1980 to 1990. They produced quite a bit of uranium from there. It was operated originally by Gulf Mineral Resources and then by Chevron after a merger. So we purchased that from them in the 90s. The year I was born is actually 91. And then ultimately we never operated it as Rio Grande Resources. Always trying to find a way to make it economic, to find a way to do it environmentally responsibly. And ultimately, once we discovered that we could do it economically, but also environmentally friendly through ISR, in situ recovery, that's when we really have started putting a lot of energy into getting this project rolling. So that's where we are today. My title is Director of Regulatory Affairs, but I really wear a lot of hats, this one included, in my job. I'm out there with Janet doing stakeholder engagement, meeting a lot of local government officials and also people on the Hill, and telling about our project to try and understand their concerns and what we can do to make sure that we are taking into account everyone's feedback. And then on top of that, we do a lot of project design work out here, a lot of project planning, surface mineral, a lot of legal work. So basically every day is different, but it's been really, really fun.
Excellent. Maybe I definitely want to get into a little bit more on the project specifics because obviously a lot of people know ISR, in situ recovery mining, as it relates specifically to uranium. But probably the precision aspect of it, would love to get into a little bit more detail. But maybe before we do that, let's talk a little bit more about sort of background on New Mexico. And have you had any work in New Mexico previously, or is this sort of a new entry into the state for you?
Yeah, so for me, I've been there a bunch now since we've got the project kicked off. We formally announced the launch in mid-November, and since then I had been spending almost every week out there in New Mexico, and the people there have been amazing. So the history on the location, I mean, as you guys know, from the 1970s to the early 1980s, there were more New Mexicans employed in uranium mining and milling than all other types of mining combined in New Mexico.
Wow.
And there was a 5-year span between the 70s and the 80s where they averaged, and that's in then dollars, like almost $400 million of revenue in that space, more than any other commodity. So the legacy is there. It was a huge employer. The potential is there. There's still a ton of untapped resource. And, again, that's why we're trying to put a lot of energy into trying to educate people that we can do this in a way that's different than the legacy conventional mining that they had a lot of concerns with. And, technology has changed a lot in 50 years. Back then we didn't even have, laptops, and look at where we are today. So there's definitely a lot we can bring to bear with the technology and expertise we have.
And maybe we could spend just a minute or two on, as Jana knows, and many of our audience knows, I'm a geologist by background, and people who are involved in the uranium industry might be aware of just how well endowed New Mexico is from a uranium perspective, but maybe some of the other listeners aren't. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that in terms of the geology of New Mexico and historical production, and then we can get a little bit more specific into grants.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tremendous amount of production occurred there from the 60s forward. And we estimate, there's still above 400 million pounds of unrecovered resource out there in New Mexico. And beyond that, again, there's a lot of companies looking at the possibility of doing conventional or ISR. The one thing that's interesting about the geology, and it depends on where you are geographically in New Mexico, but our specific site, the uranium is hosted in the West Water, which is over 3,000 feet beneath the surface. So that's what makes it so difficult for us to figure out an economical way to do this. But back when Gulf created the original conventional mine, they basically dug underground 3,000 feet and had multiple miles of drift, or basically mine area underneath the ground, which they were using to extract the ore, basically truck by truck. And that was a lot of manpower. I don't know about you, but can you imagine going down there, 100 degrees, the water's hot, 100 degrees, the rock temp is hot, very high humidity, working a very physical job, very taxing way to do things. So that, again, another reason why ISR is a much better solution for this particular geology. It's going to require a high degree of skill in order to do it effectively. But ultimately, what we're going to do is drill wells into the West Water from the surface. And we're going to use the existing groundwater that's there, add some oxygen, bicarbonate, which is basically baking soda, and use that to oxidize the uranium, get it back into the water, and pull it out through an extraction well, and repeat the process. So really minimal use of groundwater. We use what's already there. And again, much less strenuous job. It takes some very skilled drilling techniques, but again, drilling has come a really long way in the last 50 years too. So we're going to bring all the modern technology to bear with this project.
And I think that's a really important point to talk about, sort of maybe in a bit more detail, the advances in drilling technology that you're able to utilize. And probably that's where the grant's precision ISR moniker comes from a little bit.
Yeah, I'd love to hit on that a little bit. So we have affiliated operations called Heathgate and also JV Quasar out in South Australia. They produce around 4 to 5 million pounds of U3O8 a year out there using ISR. They've been doing it for 25 years. Really phenomenal, cutting edge tech, really smart engineering. And they've also kind of mastered the use of directional drilling out there as well. So although they're not going, directly vertical and then horizontal like we plan to do with our project out in Grants, they definitely have mastered directional drilling to hit ore from a deviated spot on the surface. And so we're going to bring a lot of that technical expertise over. The other, really the big feats in horizontal drilling have come in oil and gas. There's some really top-notch companies out there that have done amazing work. Specifically in the Middle East, there's some records that have been set for multi-mile lengths of horizontal wells that have been used in oil extraction, and it's really, really impressive. So we've had by one of the top firms in the world as far as drilling goes, drilling analysis. We've had them take a look at the formation, and they've said, yeah, we can. We're confident we can do it here. This is amenable to horizontal. So we're looking really forward to trying out moving forward with really what's a proven technology, but a different application here in uranium.
Definitely. No, I think it's cutting edge as it relates specific to uranium extraction, but it's not new technology. And I really think there's a huge opportunity to apply what's been done in the oil and gas space over into uranium ISR and other forms of ISR as well. Maybe if we could zero in on Grant specifically now and talk a little bit about the work that's been done on the project itself to determine the amenability towards the precision ISR methodology.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing, we always look at is, is the drilling capable? Will the wells be competent? Will that work? And yes, that study we had evaluated, and we're confident that will be effective. Again, one of the world's leading drillers took a look at that. In addition, we also have, obviously, ISR capabilities, like the chemistry. We look at the chemistry and take a look at the leachability of the uranium. And so that's one thing that we've been studying. We spent a lot of R&D on looking at kinetics and making sure we can optimize the groundwater solution so that we can achieve a high effective rate of uranium extraction using that solution. And then the other things we've been looking at doing are specifically, well field design. And one thing that's been really important to us, so is keeping the project on private land. We want to make sure that, there's a lot of sensitive areas around us, forest service and the like, that we understand are, for some people, they want to make sure that we don't create a lot of surface disturbance. So another benefit is we're going to keep, at least our first phase is definitely focused on just keeping it on private land. And also importantly, with horizontal wells, it's going to reduce, versus traditional vertical ISR, it's going to reduce surface disturbance by up to 95%. Basically, you can, for every one horizontal well, you reduce 19 vertical wells. So that's another benefit of the technology. So we've done a lot of work on the R&D side. We're going to continue to partner with, so our project director, Ben Russ, who's a chemical engineer PhD, he's working with a lot of the local laboratories. He started outreach with them, not just the national labs, but also the universities, and having them help us to study things like groundwater restoration techniques, definitely the leachability characteristics and the like. So we're also putting a lot of R&D into universities and academia to help us make sure we understand what we're doing.
Excellent. Obviously, you guys are a private company and now, but maybe if we were to sort of compare to sort of, the stages that, we're more familiar with for some of the public companies, would you say you're sort of at pre-feasibility study level and that sort of level of studies yet, or where would you be at in the process?
I would say we're in development. So at this point, the uranium is a proven resource. There's been over 400 drill exploration wells done in the area. We definitely have a good understanding of what the resource is. We also have taken core samples and basically done analysis on core samples, so we understand the characteristics of the ore. So now really we're basically refining our well field planning, making sure that we get basically all of our permit characteristics understood, and we're going to start baseline data collection here shortly as well. So the environmental baseline data collection is going to take quite a while, but one of the things that has taken us a while to get to this point is we wanted to, again, take the feedback of the community into account. So Janet's been great. She's helped us with a community town hall out in Grants in November, and we're planning to do another one for San Mateo. And so we really just want to make sure we get communication with the local community, We've talked to a lot of the government officials. We wanted to make sure we talk to the Acoma and Laguna Pueblos as well shortly, and make sure that we talk to everyone before we just move out on a lot of this baseline work.
That's great, and dovetails really nicely into sort of my next question. Is just obviously there is a lot of historical sensitivity around uranium extraction in New Mexico. How has the community response been? Obviously, you're looking at it from a different process technology, but maybe just speak a little bit to that.
Yeah, so I've been very, I would say, pleasantly surprised on how supportive everyone has been in the local community. Once we start to explain to them what ISR is and how it's different from some of the issues that they've had in the past, they've been very, very supportive. The economic benefits are kind of irrefutable. The amount of jobs we're going to put into there. I mean, we're talking like a 30-year project, so this is a generational type of project with at peak operations about 200 direct employees, and this will be skilled labor. These will be good paying jobs. And then on top of that, you have the indirect benefit of that the local economy will get, probably another 100 jobs indirect, plus pretty significant tax revenues, state taxes. If you look at the resource and severance tax plus the natural resources tax, that's going to go right into the government coffers. And then you get all of the income taxes on top of that. So this has a real great capability to kind of stimulate the local economy and the state economy. And the best part about that, I think, is you look at the benefit to the local folks there. It's going to really reduce their tax burden overall. So yeah, a lot of benefits to be had locally. So they've been very supportive. Now, there are still people with concerns, and we acknowledge that. And a lot of this, again, is just going to be educating people about what ISR is, why it's safe, how it's environmentally responsible, and again, teaching people that maybe have had issues in the past. Again, why we're different and how we're approaching this differently.
I wanted to add a little bit, and I've been pretty quiet today because I work with Daria, and I love spending time in the community with him and meeting people. Another really important benefit, and I think this is even affects you, Daria, is that we need the skilled people to move into the industry. The industry has really stagnated for decades, and ISR has been around, but it just wasn't being utilized for so many years in the United States. And so, can you speak a little bit to what it was that made you want to come into this industry? Because I see the same thing in the community.
Yeah.
There's people that are losing their kids to larger centers because they don't have the jobs.
Yeah. So I'll start with me personally, and then I think maybe the bigger picture, because it's a little bit of a microcosm. So, I've always been a huge proponent of nuclear energy. And again, having spent a lot of my, 11 years in aerospace and defense, I definitely was still very aware of the developments going on. And one of the big things was Project Pele, which I'm not sure a lot of people know about, but it's a joint effort by the DOE and DOD to develop a small modular reactor to help support remote operations for the U.S. Army and forward deployed troops. So essentially, that's going to be one of the first advancements of a small modular reactor. But the use case is so applicable for everything else. Like, what if it can be done to support an Army base? Can it be done to support a huge manufacturing facility? Can it be done to support AI data centers? So this really is, I think, the future of having reliable but environmentally friendly energy production. And on top of that, I mean, that I'm a huge fan of renewables. We definitely need the full gambit of renewables. I'm about to have a baby boy any day now. We're like 2 days past the due date, so any day now. And a big thing that motivates me is making sure that we have basically sustainable energy for thousands of years from now, for my kids and my kids' kids. So that's a huge part of what motivates me. And I think that, nuclear is a huge part of that puzzle. So I was really interested in joining the industry, especially here. We can be really impactful part of building a resilient domestic U.S. supply chain. So that fired me up pretty well. And then zooming out, Janet, as you know, this industry has been through a lot of peaks and valleys. So, if you look back, there was booms back in the 70s and the 80s as nuclear reactors were really taking off. And then a lot of events around the world kind of triggered the price to collapse a couple of times and pull back in nuclear energy development overall. And I think the winds have changed again. We had that run up in '08 that fueled a lot of growth, but then kind of, again, the peaks and valleys occurred in the financial crisis with a huge sell-off in the commodity. So we're now back in the upswing and kind of joining at a really exciting time. We definitely need a lot of youth and energy behind the movement, though, because the people, especially in uranium extraction, that have been doing this, they've been doing it, since the '80s, and we need some people that can come in and start the knowledge transfer to make sure that all that knowledge and expertise and that learning doesn't end with them. We need fresh blood in the industry, and I'm really happy to be part of that.
That's excellent. No, I think it's really important to really invigorate the next generation of geoscientists and engineers across the space to really help with the development of particularly the domestic resources in uranium and other commodities as well. Maybe along those lines, let's get into the permitting a little bit. Just because obviously we haven't seen a lot of permitting activities in the state of New Mexico. Maybe you could walk us through sort of what you see as the path on that. Obviously, we've had changes at the administration recently, so you could probably touch on that as well.
Yeah. So I look at this. I'm a silver lining kind of guy. So I like this is going to be a very comprehensive permitting effort, specifically in New Mexico. New Mexico has very stringent regulations, which are great because it makes sure that we're doing things the right way, that we're protecting the environment and the people and the air. And so that's a great thing. So I think that's the silver lining. The downside of that is there's only been one, to my knowledge, one ISR operation permitted in the state of New Mexico, and that was Crown Point / Church Rock, and that was over 20 years ago. So the permitting path for us, we believe, is going to be really important to focus on education of the New Mexico regulators. For a lot of them, this will be the first time that they're permitting an ISR operation. So helping them understand what it is, all the safety protocols that we put in place, helping them understand not just the process, but again, the importance of the decisions that we make in the design phase and why we design things a certain way. So that's going to be really important. It's going to be a very collaborative effort and a two-way street on hearing their questions, make sure we answer them and resolve them. So immediate permits, the big ones are the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So that's a federal level permit that's going to be required for an ISR operation. In tandem with that, you have the New Mexico discharge permit, which is going to be required to inject into the aquifer. Coupled with that, you have the EPA aquifer exemption, which basically says that the aquifer that you're injecting into is not exempted from being a drinking water aquifer. And obviously, there's uranium, radium in it. You don't want to drink out of a radioactive aquifer, so that gets exempted. But we have to go through all of these process iterations, these permit iterations, to make sure that we're making sure we meet all the NEPA requirements and moving forward and making sure we hit all the environmental requirements. But also, again, just to make sure that the regulators are comfortable, they understand the technology and they understand exactly how we're doing things and why. So we think it will be, realistically, we're starting baseline data collection here this year. We think it'll probably be about a year to a year and a half before we submit those permits.
Great. No, that's super helpful context to provide. And then maybe any thoughts in terms of potential changes or support that you're seeing from your guys' side with the new administration coming in?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to be excited about. I hope a lot of folks have watched the potential new Secretary of Energy confirmation hearings, Mr. Wright. So he's definitely openly said that nuclear is going to be key to energy development. And at first, people were nervous. You hear a lot about the proponents of oil and gas, but it seems like this administration understands that nuclear is a really key pillar of energy independence. So that's really good to hear. On top of that, we're also really excited that uranium might be put back onto the critical minerals list. That will unlock some federal funding, but also help fast track some permitting. So that would be really incredible if that does happen as well. And maybe even talk about something that was revived from years ago, was talk about creating a U.S. reserve for critical minerals and uranium to make sure, again, just like a strategic oil reserves, to make sure we have uranium reserves in case there becomes some kind of hiccups to the supply chain. So a lot of really exciting developments. We kind of are in a wait and see approach, but we definitely think that it'll be a net positive for the industry as we work to kind of create domestic supply here.
Excellent.
I I've waited uh, over a decade for the opportunity to work in New Mexico, and I think Greg, now that you've had a chance to really talk with Daria, you can see why I'm so excited about the opportunity to work with the people there and in a beautiful state that's just very rich in resources. And I don't know. I feel like we've covered a lot of ground today. I don't know if you've got anything else you wanted to add, Daria or Greg, anything you wanted to add?
I've got something that maybe, one of my podcast idols, I'm a big podcast guy, Joe Lowry, who does the Global Lithium podcast. I'm not sure if either of you have heard that before. He always, ends off with a question for his guests. And so, I'll do mine maybe a little bit differently. And Daria, you've got a newborn on the way. If there was any place that you could go with your soon to be born son, once they're of age to appreciate it, where would you pick to go and why?
Oh, that is such a great question. One of my wife and I's favorite place is Sedona, Arizona. It's a really beautiful place, but there's definitely a really great energy there. And every time we go there, it's super calming. We love hiking. So it's a beautiful place. So I'm really looking forward to our first hiking trip. My wife even got me the thing where I can put the baby on the baby pouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I can feel like mama bear. So I'm really looking forward to that. We really like to do hiking, and no place better than Sedona.
Excellent, excellent. No, it's a beautiful part of the world for sure. So awesome. Well, hey, Jan, I think that's it from my side. I'm not sure if you had anything else you wanted to add.
No, I've enjoyed you asking the questions today. I've had some wonderful trips with Daria, and thoroughly enjoy working with Ben, who he's also mentioned. It's a fabulous team, and it's a great opportunity. And I really thank you for taking time out of your baby watch.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, Janet, it's been really fun so far. We're just at the beginning of things, but a lot of great momentum. And Greg, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Absolutely,
everybody.
no, Daria. Really appreciate your time. Look forward to following along the Grants Energy story.